So, in the last class, if you remember, we had discussed about the philosophical views at the time of the Buddha, and we had also discussed about the six contemporary teachers who were available at the time of the Buddha, and then how 18 schools of Buddhist thought at the time of King Ashoka or Third Buddhist Council, how these 18 sects were divided into 11 Theravada and 7 Mahasanghikas school. So in the last class, we had discussed about these, and we have to see that how the Theravada and Mahasanghikas, how the Buddhist thought which were available in the Pali language literature or in Theravada Buddhism, how these were developed in Mahasanghikas. So we'll discuss in a very detailed manner later on, especially what are the changes which were developed in Mahasanghikas. And we had discussed that in the second Buddhist councils, we had seen that there was a seed of divisions in the Buddhist Sangha. And by the time of third Buddhist council, there were 18 Buddhist sects or schools. So especially we had to make a distinction between what are the Buddhist school thoughts between the Theravada and Mahasanghikas. So today we are going to discuss about what are the main philosophical views which are available in four major Buddhist philosophical thought, especially Vaibhasik, Sautrantik, Yogachara, and Madhyamik. So we are going to discuss all this in a very detailed manner. So I will discuss in a very brief manner about the how the things have been changed. So is it okay or something wrong? Rahul?
No, Professor, everything is okay.
Okay.
Yes.
So we are going to discuss about that what are the schools of the Buddhism, especially Sarvastivad, that is the Madhyamik and Yogachar, Vaibhasik and Sautantrik. How there is a continuous system of Buddhist thoughts and how these traditions from one school to another schools, how there is a continuity of this Buddhist thought. So we are going to discuss in a very detailed manner, and we had already discussed that this Buddhism is not even a single Buddhist philosophy, but there are so many philosophical thoughts or the views which have been interpreted in especially four schools of Buddhist thought. So it is in another way we can define that Buddhism is a bunch of philosophical views or the thoughts. So we are seeing that how there is a unsystematic and continuous tradition of our transmission of the Buddhist thought which arose after the first Buddhist council, and how there is a transmission of the Buddhist thoughts from time to time. So we have already seen that in the first Buddhist council, 500 Arhat took participated, and they Upali was given the task of preserve the teachings related with the Vinay, and Ananda was given the task for preserving or compiling in the form of oral traditions for the suttas or the Dhamma. So this is the until third Buddhist council, all the teachings of the Buddha were rehearsed. They were codified into three classifications, namely Tipitaka or Tripitaka, namely Vinay Pitaka, Sutta Pitaka, and Abhidhamma Pitaka. So these Sutta, Vinaya, and Abhidhamma, these are the three main collections of the teachings of the Buddha. And these Tripitaka became the codified foundations of our Buddhist philosophy. So how this teachings of the Buddha, which were compiled in the form of Vinaya, Sutta, and Abhidhamma, how these developed through a continuous attempts of the Buddha's disciples, from first Buddhist council to second Buddhist council and third Buddhist council. And they were trying to determine the true meaning of the teachings of the Buddha, that how the teachings of the Buddha. And in that way, when they were interpreting the teachings of the Buddha in different manner, then there arose different sects or different schools of the Buddhist thought. So in that way, we are having Hinian or Theravada Buddhism, under which there are four Buddhist schools, namely Sarvastivad, Mahasangikaj, Samitiyaj, and Astavirvad. So these are the main four principal sanghas which arose after the third Buddhist council. So their mutual agreement were not as much philosophical as regarding the codes of conduct, but how the spiritual attainments or the spiritual adhyatmic, that is the spiritual, how a person can get a state of eternal bliss or nirvana, how this spiritual attainment can be achieved through the meditational practices. So there were some differences in other schools of the Buddhist thought. So there are mainly two which we'll discuss. That is the Vaibhasik, Sautantrik, and this Vaibhasik school we have already seen that it is one of the branch of the Sarvastivadi school of traditions, which were thinking that all things are, whether they are past, present, and future, all are available. But other schools of Buddhist thought, they are not thinking in that way. And this Vaibhasik school is the product of all our acharyas, like Acharya Vasubandhu, who composed the text Abhidharma Kosa, and the commentary on Abhidharma Kosa, which was written by Acharya Vasubandhu himself, which is known as Asputharta Abhidharma Kosa. So these teachings of the Buddha, which were available in the Sarvastivada Abhidharma traditions, that school was known as Vaibhasik school, and it is accepted as the most authentic schools of the things. And there are two commentaries under this Mahavivasa, that is the of Vaibhasik school, namely Mahavivasa and Vivasa. There are two commentaries or the tikas which were written on Abhidharma Kosa, or that is the schools which was called as Vaibhasik school. So the Vaibhasik school was named after the name Vibhasa. So Vibhasa is as the Valli Praman or authentic teachings of the Buddha. They were considering Abhidharma Kosa as a valid teachings of the Buddha, and it adopts a realist and pluralist approach, originally called as Dharma Pravichaya. Here, Dharma Pravichaya is nothing but Pravichaya is the name of the investigation, or Dharma is here Dharma is in the sense of Panchaskandha, Dwadas Aitana, and Atharas Dhatu. That is the 5 aggregates, 12 bases, and 18 elements. So the investigation of the dharmas in 5 aggregates, 12 bases, and 18 elements. So this is the, and Sautrantrikas, there is another school which in brief manner we have discussed, that Sautantrika school is that type of school which considers sutras as only a pramanik or valid teachings of the Buddha. Whatever the teachings of the Buddha which are available in the sutras, they are only valid, or they are only original teachings of the Buddha, others are not valid. So they do not accept Abhidharma Pitaka as the Buddha Vachan. They consider only the sutras or the Sutra Pitaka. But in the case of Vaibhasik, we have seen that there are only the Abhidharma Pitaka, which is available in the Vibhasa, and there are two commentaries, Vibhasa and the Mahavibhasa. These are the two commentaries, and the text is the Abhidharma Kos and Abhidharma Kos Vyakhya, Aspurthartha Abhidharma Kos Vyakhya. So these are the two things. But in the Sautantrikas, there is a text which is called as Artha Vinishya. Artha Vinishya, Vinishya is the name of the investigation, search, or analysis. So here, that is the earth is in the sense of meanings of the teachings of the Buddha. So the investigation of the teachings of the Buddha which are available in the sutras, this is called as Sautrantikas. Sautrantikas are the name which are based upon the sutras, and the followers of the sutras, which they consider as only a valid one, this is called as Sautrantikas. So the Artha Vinishya is the core of the teachings of the Buddha. So there is a text which is called as Artha Vinishya Sutra. So Artha Vinishya Sutra is one of the texts of this Tantrika, which is considered as a only original teachings of the Buddha. Again, this Buddhist philosopher, namely Dinag and Dharmakirti, we have seen that how the Yogacharins they are considering only the consciousness as the only real things, others are not real. But in the case of Madhyamikas, they consider only the sunyata, that is the emptiness, and the Majjhima Patipada or Madhyama Pratipada as the only path through which one can get a state of emptiness or sunyata. So this is there are the paths which have been discussed in the other texts. But later philosophers like Dinnag and Dharmakirti, they developed on the Yogachar and Vijnanavadins, and they developed another theories which we will discuss in a very brief manner. So these Dinnag and Dharmakirti, they are nothing but they are only the extension of the Sautantrikas. They how they are considering the sutras as a only valid one. So Dinnag and the Dharmakirti, they are considering that this tradition of Buddhist thought as a only extension. So let us discuss about the Madhyamik thought in a very brief manner. Madhyamik thought, which was whose propounder or which founder is called as Acharya Nagarjuna. So Acharya Nagarjuna says that this only the theory of emptiness, it can be achieved through the path of middle path or Madhyama Pratipada. So this there is another sect which is also available under this Hinayana Buddhism or Theravada Buddhism, or there is a Bepul Sutras. Bepul Sutras, they are called as, there are 9 texts which are coming under the Bepul Sutras, namely Samadhi Raj Sutra, Lalit Bistar Sutra, and the meaning they are considering that this Bepul Sutras, which are 9, they are the original teachings of the Buddha, which were spoken by the Buddha himself, according to Mahayana traditions. So this Madhyamik thought, which was started by Acharya Nagarjuna, in the 1st century AD. So how this Madhyamik they are considering, and they are also negating two extremes of the viewpoints. In Theravada Buddhism, we have seen in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta that where Buddha says that Dvame Bhikkhave Anta Pavajitena Na Sabitabba. O monks, two extremes cannot be followed by a person who has renounced the household life and have taken a life of recluse. And these two extremes are Kamesu Kam Sukullikan Yogo and Atkil Mathan Yogo. These are the two extremes, that association with the sensual pleasure and association with the self-mortification. Atkil Mathan Yogo. And in between that, in Theravada traditions, we find in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta that how Buddha says that in between these two extremes, there is a middle path, which is called as Majjhima Patipada, which was realized by the Blessed One, the Buddha, which gives the wisdom to the eye, which gives the knowledge, which leads towards the state of eternal bliss. And this middle path is nothing but it is the eightfold path. That is the Arya Thangiko Maggo, namely Samma Ditti, Samma Sankappo, Samma Vacha, Samma Kamanto, Samma Ajivo, Samma Vyamo, Samma Sati, and Samma Samadhi. So these are the eightfold path. But here, according to Acharya Nagarjun avoids the two extremes, and it negates the Madhyamik school of thought, negates the two extremes, and it advocates the middle path. And what is the middle path? So this middle path avoids the two extremes view, that is the absolute reality and the absolute unreality of the things. In Theravada traditions, we have seen that there are two extremes, Kamesu Kam Sukhillika Yogo, association with the sensual pleasure, and Atkal Mathan Yogo, association with the self-mortifications. But here, there are two extremes, namely absolute reality and absolute non-reality, and asserts that everything exists in a conditions way. Conditions may means that is the pratitya samutpad, that there is no self-independent entity. Everything comes into existence dependent on some cause and conditions. So this is the that Madhyama Marg here, it asserts that everything exists in a very conditional way. Conditional means that two things are causally related with each other. And these two causally things which are causally related, they are based upon the hetu and the pratyaya. So here Buddha says that one who sees pratitya samutpad, he sees the dhamma or dharma. In Majjhim Nikaya also, Buddha says that yo pati samutpadam passati, so mama passati, yo mama passati, so pati samutpadam passati. Means that one who sees the Patisamuchpad or law of dependent origination, he sees me. Or one who sees me, he also knows the law of dependent originations. Here Acharya Nagarjuna also says that one who sees the law of dependent origination, Pratityasamutpad, he sees the dharma or the dharma. So what is the pratitya samutpad? We have already seen that imasmim sati idam hoti, imasmim asati idam na hoti, imasu pada idam upajjati, imas nirodha idam nirujjati. That if there is the existence of this, there is the arising of this. If there is no existence of anything, there will be no arising of anything. There will be cessation of that. That is why it is called that everything comes into existence dependent on some cause and conditions. And there are 12 links of the law of dependent origination, namely avidya, sankhara, vijnana, namarupa, स्पर्श, वेदना, उपादान, कृष्णा, उपादान, भाव, jati, jara, marana. There are 12 links. It has been said in Pali also in the text Mahabhagga that abhijja pachaya sankhara, sankhara pachaya biyana, biyana pachaya nam rupa pachaya phaso, phaso pachaya vedana, vedana pachaya tanha, tanha pachaya upadan, upadan pachaya bhav, bhav pachaya jati, jati pachaya jara maran. So there are 12 links. The first two, avidya, that is the avidya, ignorance, and the sanskar, mental dispositions, they are signifying the past life, and the jati and jaramaran, these are signifying the future life, and the remaining 8 are called as a present time. So there are 3 times here: Atit, past life; Vartaman, present life; and the future, that is the Anagata, that is the Bhavishyat. So these are the 12 links. So here, according to Acharya Nagarjuna, this Madhyama Marg says that all phenomena, that all things which are happening in our day-to-day life, they appear to be occurring, existing, and perishing. Means whatever the things which comes into existence, it has to be seized also. It has to be perished also. The so-called real world is actually nothing but relativity. So here theory of relativity is existing here. And some of the scholars who are comparing this theory of relativity of the Madhyama Marg of Acharya Nagarjuna with the theory of relativity of Albert Einstein. So, how the theory of relativity of Acharya Albert Einstein is compared with the theory of relativity of the Madhyama Marg or the middle path propounded by Acharya Nagarjuna. So, this is the here it is said that all phenomena which appear, they have to be perished or they have to be destroyed. So this is the principle of dependent origination. So here it is said that the existence of a thing is conditional of the other things. Conditional means avidya and sanskar, ignorance and the mental dispositions, they are causally related, and the existence of the sanskar or mental dispositions is conditional because of the ignorance, avidya. So the very being of the world is relative. It has no essence or the nature of its being. That is why it is called as nisvabhavata, that it is essenceless. There is no essence in any phenomena or the thing or the states which are happening in our day-to-day life. So this is the main philosophy of Acharya Nagarjuna. And there is another philosopher who also developed the theory propounded by Acharya Nagarjuna related with the Madhyama Marg theory of relativity, that is Acharya is called as Chandrakirti. And Chandrakirti also interpreted Buddhavacana as defining the reality or the world as essenceless, nisvabhavata. So there is everything is essenceless. There is nothing. Whatever the things which has taken place in as existence, there is nothing, any reality in that subject, because that subject is to be seized also. Again, there is another school that is called as Jokachar school or Vijnanavad school. So, according to Vijnanavad, emphasis on the yoga practice or attainment of nirvana is called as Yogachar. Yogacharans considers that the state of eternal bliss can be achieved only by through the method of yoga practice. Yoga practice that only the consciousness is the real, others are not real. In the case of our Madhyamik thought by Acharya Nagarjuna, we have seen that there is essenceless. Acharya Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti, they are saying that there is nothing real, nisvabhavata. There is no existence. Whatever the things which have taken place, it has to be seized also. So this term, Vijnanavad, is the term which expresses the philosophical approach. Philosophical approach means that there are some sutras which oppose the Madhyamik philosophers of Mahayana sutras, and in that way, according to Vijnanavad, there is a most popular text which is called as Lankavatar text, which has been developed in China and Japan, and other sub-schools were also developed in China and Japan on the basis of the Lankavatar, Vijnanavad. And you might be knowing also that the Xuan Chuan from China, one of the traveler who came in the 5th century AD, 6th century AD in India, he also took the text from India, and all the texts were translated, and this Yogachara and Vijnanavad was developed especially in China and Japan. So this Lankavatar is one of the most important texts of the Vijnanavadins. There are other texts also, namely Das Bhumik Sutra or Pragya Parvita Sutras, and Yogavachar Vijnanavad or Vijnanavad schools considers that only the consciousness, Vijnan, is the ultimate reality. Others are not real. Only the mind is the real one. Others are not real. So the so-called Vyavharik or the empirical world is only the ideal in representations of the Vigyapti of the consciousness. This consciousness is the only representations of the reality or the empirical world. Others are not real. So this Yogachara philosophy interprets the process of consciousness involving its representations as Vijnan Parinamvad. Vijnan Parinamvad is nothing but that only the Vijnan or consciousness is the real one. So according to Yogachar or Vijnanavad school or the philosophers, they say that the teachings of the Buddha aim to make a human self-aware about such subconsciousness bondage. One can get liberated through yogic practices through the meditational practices. So as soon as consciousness is free from beginningless, that is the Adi, where there is Anadi, that is beginningless desire, where there is no any desire, that where all the desires have been removed or the destroyed. So when the consciousness is free from all the desires related with the Kam Trishna, Bhav Trishna, and Vibhav Trishna, this stage is being practiced by the meditational practices, and they are considering Vijnan only as a Parinamavad, or they are considering Vijnan as a only real thing. Others are not real. So it becomes free from the Maya or illusion. That world is outside and free from compulsion of knowing the world from outside. So this is one of the Yogachar theory. So again, there are two types of thought in the Yogachar or Vijnanavad schools, and there are Klesh Avarana and Gaya Avarana. There are two types of things. Klesh Avaran means covering. Klesh means the defining factors which are darkening our consciousness, or the immoral states which are blackening our consciousness. This is called as Klesh. Our covering with the defiling factors. Our consciousness is covered with the defiling factors. In Theravada Buddhism, there are 10 types of defiling factors, namely Loha, Dosa, Moha, Raga, Avidya. There are 10 types of defiling factors. Whenever the kleshas are associated with the consciousness, this consciousness becomes not pure. That it is called as covered with the defiling factors. And as soon as they are free from the kleshas, it is called as pure consciousness. And this pure consciousness is called as Prabhaswar. Our consciousness is luminous. It is illuminating by the nature. In Anguttar Nikaya, Buddha also says that Pakati Pavasaram idam chittam tam chakho hi agantuke hi upkilese hi upkilitam. Pakati Pavasaram idam chittam, that our consciousness is pure by nature and it is being defiled by coming inward defiling factors, namely lopados, moha, and other things. Our consciousness, and until unless it is not removed, our state of eternal bliss cannot be achieved. So there are two aspects in Yogacharins or Vigyanavadi school, that Klesha Avarana and Gaya Avarana. Klesha Avarana means our consciousness is covered with the defiling factors, and Gaya Avarana means when the covering of the kleshas are removed and the knowledge of the wisdom is being achieved. So this is the two aspects of Yogachara in schools. So at the end of consciousness results into its pure non-dual nature. So this state of consciousness is called as enlightenment or bodhi, or how a person can get a state of eternal bliss. So when the Gaya Avaran is achieved, this is called as, and attaining it, it is called as Yogacharin, ideal of Mahayana Buddhism. So this is the development journey of the Buddhism. We are going to discuss that how there is a continuity from the third Buddhist council to the first century AD, where Acharya Nagarjuna has developed the Madhyama Pratipatipa, Madhyama Marg, which discusses about the theory of relativity, and it says that whether the things which are mental or not mental, they are not real. All things are essenceless, niswabhavata, and it propounds a theory of relativity known as Madhyama Marg. And there is a continuity of the Buddhist schools of thought, namely Sautrantrikas, which I have discussed, that it discusses about the Artha Vinishya, that they interpret the things by the meaning of the teachings of the Buddha, and they investigate the teachings of the Buddha on the basis of the sutras, and they consider sutras as a valid one. And then we had seen that how the Yogacharis, they consider our consciousness is the only real thing, others are not real. And a state of eternal bliss, nirvana, can be achieved through only yogic or meditational practices. So this is the continuity of the things. So how this there is a development of the all schools of the Buddhist thought, they are interpreting the teachings of the Buddha in different manner. But there is a underlining unity between all the schools of Buddhist thought, whether this is Theravada or Madhyamik or Yogacharins or Sautrantrikas or Vaivhasikas, that there is a development of the Buddhist thought, and there is a continuity of teachings of the Buddha. They are interpreting in different manners. So no Buddhist sect accepted any eternal being beyond momentary being dharma, which as they thought binds all of them in a thread. So from the Theravada, from the first Buddhist council till the 5th century AD, there is a continuity of the interpreting the teachings of the Buddha in a different manner.